The lead up to Shattered Vale created some pretty high expectations for the map, with it being set in Richtofen's notorious mansion, bringing back legacy perks and wonder weapons, and promising to start giving us some narrative payoffs. But did it live up to these expectations? In all honesty, I would say that yes, it did. It even exceeded a few of my own. However, it did also let me down in a few areas, and so today I would like to ramble about it. First and foremost, this map is beautiful, which is super refreshing because I haven't found many of these Black Ops 6 maps to look all that great. But on Shattered Vale, things are lit up really nice, there's a lot of variety with the colors, but the best part about it is all the clutter. Like furniture and decorations from the mansion, computers and equipment set up by Project Janus, and of course the blood, structural damage, and dead bodies left behind by the outbreak. It's almost like strata in a rock bed. You can see the different layers of this place's history, and it makes me want to look around and see what I can find. Unfortunately, this really only applies to the mansion itself. The outdoor areas are still kind of dull, but that is probably by design so that the indoor and outdoor environments can stand out from one another. So I can forgive that. Plus, that view you get of the mansion as you approach, with it being at this upward angle looking all big and imposing, really helps to establish the significance of this place. I do, however, wish that the two paths from spawn didn't converge right before you reach the mansion. I think it would have been slightly better if you could have approached it from two different angles, just like with the castle from Citadel, just for that extra little bit of visual variety. But I will admit that that's pretty nitpicky. My only real issue with the map's atmosphere is the distinct lack of ghosts. This mansion has always been described to us as a dark and foreboding place with a long history of people dying or going missing, so I was really hoping that it would be extremely haunted. And yeah, there are the people that are trapped in the liminal spaces, which are basically ghosts, and the jump scare Easter egg and the possessed objects during the Wunderwaffe quest, and those are cool and all, but I was hoping for more stuff like the Pied Piper statue, where all you do is stand near it and you hear a flute. It's mysterious and creepy and unnatural, and it triggers a primal sense of dread deep within me, and that's all that there is to it. It's not part of some side quest, it doesn't lead to anything, at least not that anybody has found. It's just there to be creepy, and I wish that there was more stuff like that on the map. Also, there's the lack of a proper power mechanic, which annoyed me enough on Liberty Falls, Citadel, and the Tomb, but it's worse on Shattered Vale because it would have fit perfectly on this map. Imagine getting to explore the mansion with all the lights off and the machines deactivated, all dark and quiet and abandoned looking, and then seeing it all come back to life with the power restored. That would have been awesome. Plus, the game just plays better when you can't use perks, traps, and other utilities right from the start. Of course, this is still Black Ops 6, where the breakneck pace makes it hard to take in even the best of atmospheres, which is also why I was worried that a close quarters map like this would be more chaotic than fun. And yes, you still can't stop for more than 2 seconds at a time without being swarmed, but Shattered Vale still works because they severely toned down the special enemies, leaving the horde of regular old zombies as the primary threat, which is something that I'm sure we all wanted, but I didn't realize how good it would feel to play a Black Ops 6 map without being constantly harassed by doppelgasts and amalgams, which funnily enough are both still on the map. They just only ever appear as evolutions, making them far less of a nuisance that you have to deal with and more of a consequence for not targeting the parasites. Vermin and parasites, by the way, also appear a lot less frequently. In fact, I don't think that they can even spawn naturally until the 20s. To account for this, the rate of their evolutions has been drastically increased, so the threat of amalgams is still there, but you can go your whole game without ever seeing one if you play it right, which I think is a great way to use these enemies, especially outside of their debut maps. Speaking of which, there are 2 new enemies that were introduced on this map, and they're both fantastic. For special rounds, we have the Toxic Zombies, whose greatest strength isn't in how they attack you, but rather how they die, which is to explode and leave behind a pool of acid in their place, both of which can cause some serious damage. Pair that with how quickly they'll run up on you and how numerously they'll spawn, and you'll find that you have to play these rounds a lot more strategically than normal, otherwise you'll be quickly overwhelmed by an enemy that you can't kill without hurting yourself too. And it reminds me of how dog rounds used to feel back in the day, when special rounds were there to be more of a unique challenge rather than just for the free max ammo. And I also love that the max ammo will spawn over a pool of acid, as if Treyarch is trying to trick you into going down after you've beaten the round. I don't know if that's intentional, but I think it's hilarious. And I just like to try and dive over it without taking any damage. The only thing that I wish was different about them is their appearance. I just find that humanoid enemies feel a little awkward for most special rounds, and I think that this would have been a good opportunity to use some of the wildlife that you can find in West Virginia, like bears or Mothmen. I don't know what they have, but that's also really subjective. They're still really fun to play against. The other new enemy type that we have is the Disciples, which aren't technically new, but they look and act so differently than before that they feel new. These guys are the reason that I hesitate to say that there's no boss spam on Shattered Veil, because it's their whole shtick. But the chaos that they create only lasts for as long as they live, so you're incentivized to take them out as quickly as possible. Which really isn't that hard to do. With the right weapons they will go down in seconds, but sometimes the horde around them just won't give you an opening to attack, especially within the confines of the mansion. So you have to deal with that first, giving the Disciples more time to do their work. And while they're not very aggressive, Disciples aren't pushovers either. They will defend themselves if you get too close, so it's best to be mindful of your positioning and make sure to stay out of their range. But getting up close and playing aggressively against them is still practical because they get stunned quite a bit when they take damage, and when they die, they release a surge of energy that kills everything in the immediate area. So you don't have to worry about getting surrounded by everything else, at least as long as you kill them quickly enough. Their new appearance is also really cool, leaning more into the creepy cult aesthetic rather than looking like a Black Cell Battle Pass skin, and overall they're just a big improvement over the previous iterations of Disciples. As for the remaining two enemy types that appear on this map, Manglers and Abominations, they only appear during specific steps of this main quest. Which, by the way, I think is pretty fun, even if it does just boil down to getting a wonder weapon, doing some trials, and then a boss fight. It helps that it's non-linear. You can work on the 3 ray guns and the trials in any order, just like on Citadel, and with all the different items that you need to collect, there's almost always something for you to be doing right from the start of the game, which I admit can be a little annoying for your first few games. There were plenty of times where I had to run from one end of the map to the other just because I forgot one quest item, but once you get it all memorized, it's pretty satisfying to run through. And I also really like that it's based around the Ray Gun Mark II rather than the Wunderwaffe. It allows them to make the more powerful of the wonder weapons more rare and a bit more difficult to obtain. And plus, it makes the Wunderbar Gobblegum much more useful because the Ray Gun Mark II is more common than the Wunderwaffe. Well, I mean, I have only used it 2 times, but it did work both times. The boss fight's also pretty good. I still like the tombs more, but I would call this one my second favorite. It's challenging, but in a way that still feels manageable. I like how you can use the rocks to distance yourself from the Z-Rex, and I love the extra items that get dropped into the arena for you, especially that self-revive in solo. I do also think it's kind of funny that on this close quarters map where you're encouraged to use close quarters weapons, the boss fight takes place in a wide open arena. I'm still not really sure how I feel about the Z-Rex as the boss. Don't get me wrong, I like dinosaurs as much as the next guy, but the map's centerpiece coming to life for the final encounter was already done in Citadel. At least there, it was treated as a dramatic twist, whereas the Z-Rex is more of an unintended consequence of all the space-time chicanery. But yeah, I don't know. I still would have preferred Not So Fluffy to be the final boss. She's even referenced on this map through the intel, and I'm assuming that this is her doghouse. But the real highlight of this quest, and just the map in general, is Edward Rtophen, who I'm surprised was brought into the game this early. I really thought that they were going to save him for the final map, but it's so good to have Nolan North back in this role. His performance as Rtophen really is a core part of this game's identity, especially when he gets to play into the more eccentric side of the character, like he does during the boss fight, and I hope that we get to hear more of it in the upcoming maps now that he's part of the crew. Really though, the whole story of this map is pretty good, which is really nice after how bare bones the tomb was narratively. They weren't lying about the payoffs. We uncovered more of the backstory that got us here, and some pretty major things have happened that are going to impact how the rest of this story plays out. But even the more minor parts of it were still interesting, like the little side stories with Josiah Shem, Fats Malloy, and Sam Colton. It's pretty cool that they incorporated the mansion's history into the main quest, and I thought that they were pretty memorable for being such minor characters. The fact that I can even remember their names should say a lot. We've got some pretty solid character moments as well. There's some serious stuff, like Maya being hesitant to use the Sentinel artifact to bring her brother back, and more lighthearted things like Weaver and Gray talking about getting matching tattoos. Sam started to grow on me, Peck actually speaks this time, and I am super invested in this ongoing story between Strauss and Raptor 1. But of course, the big one was the long-awaited confrontation between Weaver and Rtophen. It was a rare moment of emotional honesty from Rtophen. He's normally so calm and collected, but here we got to see his rage slip out, even if just briefly. And Weaver, well, some might say that he was quick to change his mind about killing Rtophen, but he had been struggling with feeling responsible for what happened to Requiem, and it was basically confirmed that that actually is the case. Killing Richtofen's family may have been a mistake, but if he had not done it, then it would have prevented a lot of bad things from happening. And I think that that's enough to make anybody second guess their motivations. Hopefully we'll get to see him really process this in the next map. Unfortunately, other than that, this map's cutscenes are not great, mostly due to how they handle the other characters. I really hate how Gray, Carver, and Maya all have nothing to say when they first meet Rtophen. Sure, part of Richtofen's speech was directed at Gray when he brought up Maxis, but they all should have had the chance to speak to him and force him to win all their trusts individually. At least Weaver kind of represents Gray and Carver, but Maya has completely different reasons for being there. She is face to face with the person responsible for her brother's death, and the fact that Weaver killed his family does not justify that. So she should not have been standing silently in the background. At least Carver gets to speak up in the outro, which is a slight improvement, but even then, he and Weaver should have swapped roles. Carver was the one that got the group through their 6 years at Terminus, he helped Weaver through his mopey phase on the boat to Avalon, and he even says on this map that he'd rather see Rtophen in jail than dead. To me, he has always been the most level-headed of the group, so he should have been the one to look at the bigger picture and suggest working with Rtophen to stop the greater of two evils that they helped to create, rather than having that little outburst.
Major, fuck you!
Also, Shem's artifact was such a deus ex machina. It would have been so much cooler if they used the Obscurus Altilium to escape the liminal space. That would have been way better justification for it to exist. Despite that though, this is still a really good map. It feels like a direct response to a lot of the criticisms that this game has received, and while it's not perfect, it's still very fun to play. I would even go as far as to say that it is the best map in Black Ops 6 so far.